Well, there were a whole lot of competing political messages this week on the true state of the Canadian economy, with the opposition Conservatives seeking to redefine a technical recession as a full-blown recession and pin the blame for it on Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Canada's had 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking GDP, the only country in the G20 that can say that. Will the Prime Minister tell us whether we are in a recession or a technical recession?
What this government is doing is putting in place the foundations of an economy that will be stronger, more resilient, more independent.
The Prime Minister, once again, is failing the Canadian people by refusing to tell them the truth, that he caused a recession.
The data is going to be uneven, and we see some weakness. You have these cross currents as the economy is being fundamentally transformed. We're going to continue to work. We're making progress, but there's more to be done.
But throughout the week, economists, the major banks, and the Bank of Canada all pushed back on the notion that Canada is truly in a recession of any kind. And by the end of the week, a new jobs report added some weight to that side of the debate. Statistics Canada reported today that the Canadian economy added 88,000 jobs in May. The unemployment rate, well, it fell to 6.6% from 6.9% in April. And today, the C.D. Howe Institute's Business Cycle Council, the unofficial authority of what is or isn't a recession, ruled it is too early to conclude that the Canadian economy is in a recession because the data doesn't meet the standard of a pronounced, persistent, and pervasive decline in real economic activity. Now, against the backdrop of that debate, the government took some big decisions on big tech, rolling back a ruling to make streaming companies pay more for Canadian content while rolling out a strategy to deal with the opportunities and the threats presented by artificial intelligence. And one more thing. Dominic LeBlanc, he went to Washington to try to jolt those pesky Kuzma talks along. So, lots to chew over with our party insiders. Greg MacEachern is here. He is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. Fred DeLorey is a former Conservative campaign manager. And Mélanie is a former communications director for the NDP. Welcome to Business Week, you three. Fred, I'll start with you on the big question. Does Jalen Brunson need to score 30-plus again tonight for the Knicks to go up 2-0 on the road against the Spurs?
They have enough balance that they can, as a team. I will say, as a Conservative, I am nervous when we're the big, heavy favorite, because sometimes it doesn't work out.
Exactly. All right. Don't get a 25-point lead is what you're saying. Look, the debate all this week, this argument, no one is saying the economy is good, right? Even the people on the government benches, they recognize it's in a state of play, that, there's transition, change, and there's challenges. How do you think this is resonating with voters, this argument over trying to say that Mark Carney caused all of this?
I think I said it last week, how it's dangerous politics to be going out here claiming the sky is falling. When in a month's time or 2 months' time, when the next numbers come out, it shows that it isn't. It was a week later. We're here a week. The job numbers are better than they were last quarter. We have the C.D. Howe Institute coming out and arguing, another economist saying it's not a recession. And it's problematic when you choose to go down that road that Poilievre has chosen to go down so aggressively, almost like he's rooting for a recession. I understand partisan politics very well. I'm a tribal Conservative. I want to win the next election. 3 years before an election, screaming that the sky is falling every week is not how you do it.
Right. So Mel, I wonder what your thoughts are on how this is resonating or not, if it is resonating with people, because I saw some interesting stuff from Dan Arnold this week, who was the Liberal Party pollster for years, and he made the point that for 6 years, Canadians have already felt like they're in a recession because things have been so flat and so stagnant, and it was really only immigration, which got to unsustainable levels, that was driving GDP at all.
Right. I think there's a few things, and as it relates to the, are we or aren't we, yes, dangerous when parties try to make it what they want it to be made. I think helpful that, we got some clarifications this week from folks who are tasked with paying attention to that. I do think, though, that to your point, or to maybe Dan Arnold's point, I don't know that folks have the exact definition of what is what. So are we in a recession or are we not? I think I Googled last week what technical recession was in comparison to a recession because I did not know, the two different things. I think everybody is feeling the squeeze, period. So to your point, folks are already feeling that. As it relates to how are we talking about it, there's always an opportunity to define yourself and what you're doing and what your opponent is doing and who they are. And it just doesn't work when you're talking about Mark Carney to say that you understand the economy more than he does. I think Canadian voters made that clear in the last election, that they thought he was the person who understood it, and it was not Pierre Poilievre. So for Pierre Poilievre to come back and say, you know, to try to take him to task, to talk as if he's almost cheering on because he sees it as an opportunity to maybe become back in power, just continues to make him seem like he doesn't know what he's talking about, like he's unserious, and he doesn't have a thing that he's talking to people about. So that's kind of the things that I'm paying attention to this week. It'll be interesting to see if this... not if this hurts the Prime Minister, but if folks start questioning whether or not he's doing the right things to tackle, you know, those economic pressures that people are feeling. But again, hearing the news that we're hearing this week, and even we were hearing it last week, that we didn't think that maybe we were going to be as bad because the month have already rebounded.
Yeah.
Does it stick? Is he able to point to things that are helpful, or is he able to keep not really doing much because the opposition's not efficient in getting its point across, is kind of what I'm tracking.
Well, Greg, I mean, I don't see, there are no signs as of today that the job reports and the CD House statement is going to, you know, change the tactic of the opposition. Or they have an ad out using generative AI to have people in lines for food and losing jobs, you know, attacking Carney on the whole thing. I mean, what do you make of how this will get traction or won't get traction with voters out there?
Well, I don't think it's going to give traction to Pierre Poilievre. So Fred said, you know, going around acting like the sky is falling. That's one thing, but being gleeful and happy that the sky is falling, which is kind of the vibe that he gave, especially in question period, not a great thing. So he said that a week ago today that it was a full-blown recession. I think he forgot to tell the labor market. And if he's blaming the Prime Minister for what he says is a full-blown recession, is he also going to give him credit for the 88,000 jobs? Highly doubtful. So for somebody that said his economic credentials were better than Mark Carney's, he is not burnishing them with these actions and how he's handling it. On Wednesday, he's been complaining that he wants the Prime Minister to be in the House more. So during Wednesday's question period, Pierre Poilievre repeated again and again the same question. Is it a full-blown recession or is it technical? Well, wait, you told us, Mr. Poilievre, on Friday that it was a full-blown recession. So this is what, I can't use the word that John Turner called it, but baloney theater is what John Turner used to call question period. And here's a ripe example of it. And after a little while, like, I think the Prime Minister was just thinking like this is kind of useless. But what I was also thinking about watching the faces behind Mr. Poilievre is, yeah, there are people that are hurting out there. And the people that represent those people are on all sides of the House. Some of them are sitting behind Poilievre, and they would probably like to have some real questions asked. Like, there is places where they could go. I know the Prime Minister is frustrated by the money not going out the door fast enough. There's housing money that the provinces could be sending. There are places for them to go after. But playing a game of technical versus full-blown, I don't think Canadians really care.
Yeah, Campbell Clark had a good column in the Globe and Mail today about how Carney has transformed how the government politically is operating and policy is operating, but not the machinery. It hasn't transformed the economy yet. And, you know, Fred, you know, the Prime Minister and others will point to wage growth in the country being higher than inflation, and that's broadly true for the top 60% of earners, not for the bottom 40% of earners. So there's still like a real affordability crunch there. But when you still have those challenges and an acknowledgement that the economy is struggling, and you're the opposition, and you see, like the Leger poll this week, Liberals have 50% of decided voters. You know, more and more Canadians think they're on the right track. I mean, how do you calibrate a response to that?
It's incredibly challenging. Keeping in mind, we had a very, very unpopular Trudeau government that was replaced by a new Carney government. And as a Conservative, we could sit here and say, oh, still Liberals, same old Liberals, same cabinet, same staff. Canadians aren't looking at it that way. They see Carney as a new player because he wasn't involved in the Trudeau era. And he's got a very different approach than Trudeau.
It is functioning very differently.
It's completely
than the Trudeau government.
Right? Look, many have said this is, and myself included, this is very much like a PC government. It's almost like the PCs are in government federally with Carney and how his approach and his whole mantra, his whole purpose, his whole narrative is to build and to get stuff done. That is a complete reversal of the Trudeau era. The stuff they're undoing from the Trudeau era, they're like, Canadians view this as a new government. So for any opposition party, it's hard to say, hey, you need change, we need to do something, when Canadians are looking at it as, we have change, we've elected change.
So how do you punch through on that, though, if you're the Conservatives, obviously, is the official opposition, when there are, problems at the bottom 40% of the economic ladder? There are still, growth challenges and employment challenges. That's a good job to report. That could be revised down, and it doesn't replace the jobs that have been lost since January. But 50%, Jean Chrétien Iraq War levels of support from Mark Carney.
Yeah, one of the most important things to remember is we could be 3 years out of an election. The 50% doesn't really matter. It does if you're looking at it short term. You keep thinking every week we have to go out and try to bring these guys down and bring their numbers down. If you do that, and maybe that's what they're trying to do with all this recession talk, that's not going to work. It's not going to work long term. I think, as I said last year after the election, give these guys enough rope to hang themselves. Support what they're doing. If you think you want them to build stuff and do it, give other solutions that you think maybe they could do a better job of it and be more of a productive partner. You don't have to oppose every single thing. You don't have to agree with everything, but just try to be more constructive with it and show that you can be a government in waiting. So in 2 or 3 years' time, if people are still hurting, if people are hurting more than they are now, you can say, hey, we have an approach here that could be better than what Carney has done.
Mel, how much of it do you think it is, like Axe the Tax became the thing that punched through in such a massive way for Pierre Poilievre, and he really became the agenda setter, the main character of Canadian politics for a chunk of time? The Prime Minister is unquestionably the main character of Canadian politics now, and Donald Trump in the best supporting role, I suppose. How much of it is trying to find that? Because they are not driving headlines and the news agenda the way they did. It is the Prime Minister and his plan that seems to be leading it all.
Right. He had something that was really easy to say and really easy to explain, and had a really easy way to tell people what the cost of their lives was, and he's not able to do that now. And anything that he could say, Mark Carney's kind of doing it, or is doing something similar, or is doing something maybe better than what he could have proposed. So it's really confusing for him right now, I think. That the other thing is people are less angry. I think people are still frustrated. I think people are still worried, but they're not mad like they used to be. I think a lot of that was towards the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, mad at Prime Minister Trudeau. So the anger that he was able to tap into with his, Axe the Tax, his, I forget the other three, Axe the Tax.
Build a home, stop the crime, fix the budget.
Stop the crimes, fix the budget. Yep. Thank you for reminding those. I appreciate you. A lot of that was people were angry, and this is what he was saying to kind of channel that anger so that people, were with him, and to Fred's point, to get change. So what does he do now? I don't know. I think he's probably been asking himself that since the last election, or if he hasn't and he thinks the same things are going to work, maybe that's why he's struggling. I think he needs to Fred's point, you can hold the government's feet to the fire. You could say, this doesn't seem to be working. We're going to make sure that they do more so that it is working. There are ways to still talk about the fact that it was a technical recession or that things aren't going as well as they could be without seeming like, team anti-Canada, which is kind of what we saw this week.
But Greg, the underlying issues, the causes are different, but it was post-COVID inflation and all of these different things that Pierre Poilievre capitalized, when Prime Minister Trudeau was still there. But the economy, affordability, people's sense of economic well-being and their economic security, still the dominant things, right? Whatever the cause of it all is now. But the indifference that the Trudeau government showed on affordability and the economy in their musings and policy and focus, that's not there now. So the battlefield is not seated in a way, and that's what seems to be part of the challenge for the Conservatives.
Absolutely, and you mentioned what Dan Arnold was talking about. I think a year ago, what I would have said, we were still, maybe not as much by June, but in the early days of Donald Trump, there was this dread that everyone was feeling, and I think that has kind of given away, that people are still not other than summer weather coming. There's not a lot to be happy about. But then you see the jobs report today. People, I think, are still nervous. I think the Conservatives, and look, I'm not the Greg MacEachern who was, in the NHL 91 draft. I'm definitely not that person, but I can tell the difference between elbows up and throwing an elbow. And I think for a lot of people, they did not understand that is the approach of the government, that elbows up is about defending yourself. And if you want to walk into this, go right ahead. Throwing an elbow is a little bit different, and that has not been our style. And I don't think the Conservatives have ever understood why Canadians, to the extent that we've been talking about here, over 50% support, why they cannot connect with that. At this point, I think if I'm a Conservative supporter or an MP, you start to get pretty frustrated when you still keep chasing headlines or trying to find, a three-word slogan.
So in the backdrop of all of this, Fred, is the CUSMA negotiations. Dominic LeBlanc met with Jamieson Greer this week. There are positive signals coming out of this in terms of propulsion of process. David Patterson, the Ontario trade rep, saying we might have a deal by Labor Day, is what he thinks. And even Ambassador Hoekstra is saying positive things about the chances of a deal. What do you make of where things stand right now, that there seems to be some traction, at least?
Certainly feels like that's the vibe right now, that something is moving in the right direction finally, after a year or so of uncertainty. So hopefully the two sides can really sit down and bang something out that is long lasting as well, and something that we can actually have faith with, that doesn't get torn up the next day after it's signed.
Yeah, but what do you make of, there were moves this week, Mel, to try to regulate AI. Mm-hmm. A lot of big American companies with the ear of the White House are involved in that. There were moves this week to send the CRTC decision back to the drawing board because of big American companies that have the ear of the White House were, upset with it, and we're going to pass it on to consumers. So it's very clear. They say it's an affordability measure, but it's also a trade issue. Mm-hmm. What does that tell us about where things might be? That they're taking something that could have made things inflamed a bit and tossing it back at least for a year or two.
Mm-hmm. If I'm being, if I'm giving the government the benefit of the doubt, I guess maybe I'll start there. Is to Fred's point, things hopefully are going well in those conversations, and they're trying to avoid things going, sideways again for another time. If I'm being maybe a little bit less fair, it was also this week that we saw the president tweet or put on Truth Social 51st state again, and we saw the ambassador retweet it in the news or in reference to the news of a technical recession. So I think we're all hopeful that the rumors of things progressing are good. I think a lot of people are also paying close attention to it and are worried what could be on the chopping block to make the Americans happy, be it you talk to AI, you talk to CRTC. We could also talk about the digital services tax. We could talk about other things that have been put in the window and removed because of conversations with the Americans. So I think folks are hopeful, and I think people are willing to see how it plays out. But there's also a bit of apprehension of, is this just going to go back to the 51st state stuff? And the second that he sees a reason to take an off-ramp, he's going to take another off-ramp. I would say, though, that the fact that people don't know what's up and what's down with this administration, this side of the border, still gives the Prime Minister a lot of leeway to make those moves and to see if this is something that's going to work or if this is not something that's going to work. I think while people may not like some of the things that are on the table that could be given away, I think people are holding their breath and they're hopeful that he's successful.
Greg, I'm not entirely sure the people are actually having the direct contact with the U.S. administration knows what's up or down on any given day, right? Like it feels like progress, and you're dealing with Jamieson Greer, and he's a professional trade negotiator, whether you agree with him or not, but Trump is Trump. I mean, how many Iran is really close updates have we gotten from the president, in the last, 100 days now? And what do you make of where this is, that all the members of the council, industry groups, they seem to see a little bit of light, maybe, in this process now?
In which industry?
Well, just all the people who were on the advisory council, met with Don LeBlanc, got the briefing. You talk to people who were there informally and on the air. They see some hope, right?
Well, I mean, the big takeaway out of Dominic LeBlanc's press conference and comments was the word unfrozen. That if things were frozen, that now they're not. And so I guess we are to take from that the news is that there's conversations going on. The reason I was asking about which industry, because we were talking about cultural.
Yes.
And I do think, you know, I worked for a streaming service for a long time. I do not work for them now. I want to be really clear on that. But, you know, something that there is a lot more to it than just, you know, heritage officials used to come up to me and say, we need to tell more Canadian stories. And after a while, this was so annoying, I would say, well, what exactly does that mean? Are we going to reboot Littlest Hobo? Who knew?
Turns
I was
out they
right.
are. Yeah.
Seth, I'm available. But you know, there are a lot of productions. Like the Canadian content rules are very strange. Like The Handmaid's Tale, filmed in Canada, Canadian author, not Canadian content. Alias Grace, same author, but you know, produced by the CBC. A movie called Brooklyn that is about a woman that goes from Ireland to Brooklyn. That is Canadian content, and this is what gets people really frustrated. But at the end of the day. There's a lot of movies being shot in Canada. The industry is quite busy, and it's really hard to have a point of view around entertainment, from a 317 channel universe when we've all kind of moved on. And so this is where cultural policy has its challenges because it has to follow the technology. It's really tough for provinces like Quebec when you're trying to defend language. I totally understand that. But there are a lot of Canadian productions out there that are not considered Canadian, and I understand why different producers, different people in the industry get very annoyed by that.
Yeah, and Fred, I know you were shocked by that, but Seth Rogen is going to reboot Littlest Hobo for Bell and Crave. This was announced at the Bell Upfronts this week. So there you go. I don't know if London can come back. I feel like maybe they might need a different dog.
I think this hour is 22 minutes in that with a little help from perhaps a stuffed dog.
Yeah, that could be it. But look, the CanCon regulations are a whole thing. But what we did see, Fred, was the move back on the CRTC decision and the discussion of dealing with artificial intelligence without yet seeing the clear guidelines and regulations and the ability to sort of regulate these big tech companies. And if you look at how online news has gone, the digital services tax being dropped, it is really tough to do stuff that the U.S. tech sector does not like in a country like Canada, because they've got the White House on speed dial, and the trade agreements and market access all come into play with those things.
Right. Well, full disclosure, my firm represents a number of folks who are opposed to the streaming taxes.
Yeah.
But yeah, anytime you're dealing with this sort of thing, it is going to be complicated. But we have to remember a lot of this, what we're seeing was stuff from the Trudeau era. And there's been a long history in the last year of Carney undoing much of that. And
haven't noticed. Doesn't come up.
No, it doesn't. So this is, there's bad policy out there that is being fixed. And a lot of that is what we're seeing with some of this stuff. It's not just about U.S.-Canada relations. It's about, there's things that the Trudeau government did that needs to be undone.
It's not just bad, but I will say well-meaning, and the timing has changed on a lot of things. And that's, to be fair.
Crushed our economy, did terrible things.
Okay, no,
6 years of
I was being fair.
You're
If both of you want to argue, dental care is still in place.
Well, for now, Mel. I mean, who knows what comes in the 2027 budget and things like that? Who knows? But is that what this is? Just more of a break from the Trudeau era, Mel, or is it the affordability argument that they laid out there, even though I did watch the Liberals for a week say this wouldn't actually drive costs and then said, well, we can't do it because it will drive costs? It's a bit like a carbon tax.
Just quickly on that. Affordability era and the Trudeau thing are the same thing, right? It causes the affordability issue. Trudeau's 10 years in government.
Sure. That's why my Netflix went from $8 a month to like $24 a month. It was just Trudeau. I don't think so. No, I take your point.
I see Fred, but I hear Danielle Smith. But anyway.
Well, but there's been some swallowing of themselves whole on some arguments. Do you think it's as simple as that? Do you think it's the affordability argument, as the Prime Minister says, or is it trade? Is it just we're not going to do anything to wave a red flag in front of the White House right now?
Right. Just because we've gone around the table and we've talked about this, I will also mention it wasn't that long ago that Minister Freeland told us to just cancel our Disney Plus if our household budgets were tight. But
I really wanted to watch Andor, so I wasn't doing that. Anyway, keep going.
Only Murders in the Building is really good too. I obviously have no intel otherwise, but I think that it's a direct reaction to what's happening in the U.S. and a direct reaction to any of those conversations happening, and knowing that this would be another step in either angering or triggering that relationship. I don't think the folks around the table for Team Canada can afford any more of those, nope, done, restarting, frozen versus unfrozen. I don't think that there's appetite for that, or things will quickly change as it relates to the Canadian public if that stuff continues to happen. So I think it's a reaction to the United States. But again, I don't have a direct line into the Prime Minister's office, so
Right.
that's just what Mélanie thinks.
Frozen also streaming on Disney+.
Yes.
But Greg,
Frozen 3 coming soon.
with-
Also, Toy Story 5 today. Big news. Taylor Swift.
with these, this became a pop cult. This became commotion.
I'm
or
learning
Q.
so many things I didn't know
I know,
coming
Fred.
up.
There's a
Welcome
bunch
to
of
Q.
Yeah, Fred only watches CBC. See, that's his problem. But Greg, with all of this stuff, it becoming unfrozen, with there being traction, with people talking about Labor Day, that this starts to create some expectations. Right, which the Carney government has been very good at managing through the roof when they arise. What do they need to do? Do they need to have this done by September? Do they? Because if the economy is going to stay a little bit flat, which it seems it might, right? Do they need to really show tangible progress on the U.S. side for the public?
Well, there's been a number of economic predictions. You had Peter Armstrong off at the top of the show, where the economists keep getting it wrong. So we don't even have, like next week we're going to have, is it interest rates? I think next week, and we're hearing that it's supposed to be the same. Well, I think they're going to drop it by. We can't judge that anymore. I think at this point, Canada has shown that we're doing everything that we can in terms of worldwide partnerships. I love the fact that the middle power, that language is back, so we kind of remind ourselves where we are. But we see on a daily basis, not even a weekly basis, that the President of the United States can pull the rug out from under whoever it is that's negotiating on behalf of his or a cabinet representative. So it's really tough. So I would say, yes, absolutely. We need certainty as soon as possible. But I think people realize, you're negotiating with Donald Trump, who seems to be in full REM, mode in the middle of something in the Oval Office. So I think people, are grading that on a bit of a curve.
Yeah, Fred, I mean, how do you see it, right? Like, the economy is flat, job numbers are up and down, but they're good numbers today. But, as we said off the top, the poll numbers are sky high for Mark Carney. Like, people call this a slim majority. It's kind of not with the political support behind it, right? It's pretty durable. What's your sense of where the expectations will be, as we get deeper and deeper and deeper and past July 1 on the NAFTA review, CUSMA review?
Yeah, I think it comes down to how Canadians are impacted. Are they feeling it? Is there something that is, are things going to get worse? Do we actually get into a real recession? Those sorts of things, and then they'll look at why and what has the Prime Minister actually done. I will put a bit of warning on those 50% numbers too. Like, they're there now. A lot of it, people are parking and they want to see the government succeed. It doesn't mean they'll vote if there's an election today that way. But I will say, economically, outside of the politics of it, we do need a deal. There's so much uncertainty. It's hard to make capital investment choices when people aren't sure. I was talking to some friends in the manufacturing sector this week who just had to lay off tons of people in the prairies and are looking potentially at opening a new facility. They don't know what side of the border to do that. And to hire those people back, where will they be hiring them? And they can't do that until a deal is done. So there's lots of stuff hinging on this across the country. So we need something. And if these stories start to galvanize and keep going, it could cause and would cause political damage.
Yeah, so Mel, we are seeing more and more signals out of the U.S., though. Like they reduced the tariff on the steel derivatives, which is a recognition, we're making life harder for ourselves. They have, even though they've done the forced labor tariffs and review there is a CUSMA exemption. And even when talking about the auto standards that they want for American parts, it's in line with the average of what is made in Canada. And they are speaking to the Mexicans about a North American auto sector, which is very different than what Howard Lutnick said when he beamed into the thing, so we're going to take your car plants, right? So it does seem on the other side of the border, Trump's losing votes in Congress, and midterms are coming. They're recognizing they need to get this done, and there's some political pressure on the White House ascending.
Yeah, I think so. And I think not just because of what has happened, obviously, with Canada or with terrorists from around the world, but some of the decisions that the president went ahead with that his base really was not on side with. So I think he's seeing a loss of support from his people. And he also has to show that he's maybe doing things differently. So yeah, I think you're right that there are some signals coming from the U.S. that they may be a little bit more willing to have those conversations with Canada. But again, I'm always worried that the thing that has happened for the last year and a half now is something happens that side of the border and we get tossed to have a distraction or to walk away from it. So that's, I guess, the worry. But again, from our side, and everybody's said it already, the time is on the Prime Minister until people start feeling it a lot more in their real lives.
But they're feeling it now, aren't they?
They are, but I think there's also this I don't know if it's tired of the U.S., tired of the last year that we've had. I think folks are going to go home, are going to go enjoy their summers, pay attention to whatever they're doing, their kids at home, etc. I think September isn't, when you ask, do you need to show for something in September? I think September is when people start really focusing in. I think there's also an opportunity for the opposition to make a point of it when it's back in the House and, figure out what it is that you want to say on it. So I do think the timeline of when he needs to start showing that he's doing things that is improving people's lives as it relates to the U.S., I think that timeline gets shorter and shorter once we're back in the fall.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the political argument goes if you get more positive job reports and more positive GDP. You know what I mean? Like, it just sort of cuts the legs out of the narrative. But, the vulnerability, Greg, and I'll give you the last word, is that you're dealing with a president whose policy choices are often at odds with his policy goals. I want to make life more affordable for Americans. He starts a trade war with the world. I want to bring down the price of gas. He goes into Iran, right? He wants to keep America out of forever wars, and look at what's going on, right? So you can't look at the president and think, oh, logically, this is what he will want, because the impulse always seems to overrule the reason.
Yeah, and that goes down to some of his own allies, some of his own supporters. Look at the number of people that he's turned on in terms of when they were going up for appointments at the UN or running. So, there is no coherence there. So it's nice that the talks are unfrozen. But what happens on a day-to-day basis when you're dealing with this person? I know we're very heavily dependent on the midterms. And it will be interesting to see if a strong voice on behalf of the Democrats can come out and actually start to articulate on a regular basis what is going wrong with America under this person. And what I've seen so far, I'm not super hopeful on that.
Yeah, it's anyway. It's amazing how this confluence of geopolitical issues are coming through and just disrupting domestic politics. Right? It's a challenge for the opposition parties. All right, a good rational conversation on a Friday. Go enjoy your weekends. Fred DeLorey, Greg MacEachern, and Mélanie Richet.